If you ask people what they truly want out of life, uh, a really common answer, almost universal, is I want to be happy. It seems so simple, right? Yet for so many, it feels incredibly elusive, like this destination you can't quite reach. Is their secret a map, maybe?
Well, yeah, it does feel like that sometimes. And while there's no single magical formula, our deep dive today into Dr. Gad Saad's The Saad Truth About Happiness reveals quite a few, well, necessary ingredients for a genuinely fulfilled life. We're going to unpack how ancient philosophical wisdom, Aristotle and folks like that, and cutting-edge social science actually converge. They offer a pathway, really, to a more contented, happy life. Think of it almost like a shortcut to understanding what really makes us tick when it comes to well-being.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. We've got quite a journey ahead then, blending Dr. Saad's own stories, some surprising research findings, and really practical strategies too. We'll explore pretty much everything from choosing the right partner and job, huge decisions, to the power of play, which I love, the importance of moderation, and even how we can actively conquer regret. So, this isn't just about defining happiness, but how you, our listener, can actively be its architect, how you can make conscious choices to build your own well being. And just to be clear, today's deep dive draws exclusively from Dr. Gad Saad's book, which really weaves together his academic work, his personal life, and a whole range of scientific and philosophical sources. It gives us this really rich picture.
The foundation of happiness beyond the surface.
Okay, so let's unpack this universal quest first. It really does seem like everyone everywhere wants to be happy. But defining it, let alone getting there, feels like trying to catch smoke sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What's the latest research telling us about this fundamental human desire?
Well, it's incredibly consistent. Surveys consistently rank being happy right at the top of life goals. It's statistically tied, actually, with having great and fulfilling relationships.
Hmm.
And this isn't just, a passing fancy. It's a deep-seated, persistent objective that really underpins so much of human experience. But like you said, the challenge lies in finding a reliable recipe for what this optimal good life actually looks like. We all want it, but the path, well, it's often not very clear.
And it feels like the variables are just kind of endless, doesn't it? How much of our happiness is actually within our control versus, what's just predetermined by our genes or our circumstances? Is it all just a genetic lottery?
That's a really crucial question. And the complexity, yeah, it definitely arises from tons of variables. You've got innate dispositions, genes, temperaments, then situational factors like, are you in a good marriage? Do you hate your job? And then there are those adaptable mindsets we can cultivate. Dr. Saad really emphasizes that while genes certainly play a part, maybe around half, according to some research, a significant chunk of our happiness comes from conscious choices, our specific life paths, and environmental factors we can actually influence.
Okay, so that's really empowering then. It means it's not just luck of the draw. We can actively do things.
Exactly. It means happiness isn't just a genetic lottery. It involves specific behavioral and cognitive strategies that you can actively put into practice,
Yeah.
regardless of where you're starting from.
So it sounds like happiness isn't just for philosophers sitting around contemplating life anymore. It's becoming a real field of scientific study.
Precisely. Happiness is no longer solely the domain of philosophy. It's now a subject for rigorous, empirical scientific research. And Dr. Saad's approach, it's really interesting. He blends ancient wisdom, pulling from Aristotle, Viktor Frankl, with a very contemporary research. It positions him almost as a kind of global therapist for our well-being. And, it's a charming little detail, but his last name, Saad, it actually means felicity, happiness, and prosperity in Arabic.
No way. That's perfect. Maybe he was destined to write this book.
Chuckles.
Maybe so.
And I've definitely heard the term positive psychology more and more. Is that part of this shift? Are we seeing a whole new field emerge here? Absolutely. The rise of positive psychology with really influential figures like Martin Seligman, Laurie Santos, David Lankin, Sanjul Bamirsky, Daniel Gilbert, Jonathan Haidt. It shows a clear shift. This scientific lens helps us move beyond just, navel-gazing towards actual evidence-based insights. And the book itself is explicitly prescriptive. It aims to help you improve your life through smarter decisions, reflecting what Dr. Saad calls his newfound role as a guide to practical well-being. He even tells this funny story where Glenn Beck associated him with being happy, joyful. But his own wife gave him this counterintuitive advice. She said, you need to be less happy and less smiley if you want people to follow your advice.
Really? Why?
Well, her thinking was that wisdom gained through visible suffering is often seen as more authentic. the wise old sage who's seen it all. But that's a perception Dr. Saad himself fundamentally disagrees with. He really underscores that conscious choices can boost well-being, no matter your natural disposition or how smiley you look.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about feeling good, it's about actively building strategies that lead to a more fulfilled life. And one of the most compelling reasons to actually pursue happiness might surprise people. It's its profound impact on your physical health.
Yeah, this is a really powerful insight. Happiness isn't just an outcome of good health. It's actually an antecedent to it. Being happy actively leads to better health outcomes. It's this profound bidirectional relationship. So yeah, poor health can definitely diminish happiness, that's obvious. But happiness itself can proactively improve your health.
That's quite a claim. So it's not just that healthy people tend to be happier, but being happy can actually make you healthier. How does that work? What are the mechanisms?
It really highlights that powerful mind-body connection. Cultivating happiness is, in a way, a preventative health measure. So first off, happy people are just more likely to engage in health-promoting behaviors. They tend to exercise more, eat healthier diets, that sort of thing. Second, and this is really key, they exhibit a range of positive biological markers. We're talking lower levels of cortisol, that's the main stress hormone, less inflammation throughout the body, and lower blood pressure, all crucial indicators of physical health.
Wow. So actual measurable physiological changes, not just feeling better. And what about mental health? I imagine there's a strong link there too.
Well, absolutely. From a mental health standpoint, happy individuals are less prone to perfectionism. They tend to adopt what Dr. Saad calls a good enough mindset instead of constantly stressing over getting every last drop of benefit. They're also less susceptible to the negative effects of social comparison, which, as we'll get into, is a huge source of stress in modern life. And critically, happy people tend to find the silver lining in tough situations. It's a mindset you can actually nurture through things like cognitive behavior therapy. This connects directly back to Stoicism, right? Epictetus famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This ability to reframe things is like a powerful vaccine against life's bumps.
That's incredibly empowering, knowing we have that agency. So, okay, if happiness makes us healthier, what are some of the common traps or pitfalls that can undermine it? Especially today, in our hyper-connected world, I'm already thinking about how much we compare ourselves.
Navigating the modern landscape of well-being.
You've definitely hit on a core challenge there. One of the most insidious traps is how happiness becomes what Dr. Saad calls a positional emotion for us. We are fundamentally a social species. We're inherently concerned with our relative standing compared to others.
Okay, positional emotion. So keeping up with the Joneses isn't just some saying, it's actually wired into how we feel happiness.
Exactly. That concept is central to social comparison theory, and it underpins what the Cornell economist Robert Frank called the positional economy. In this kind of economy, what really matters isn't just what you have in absolute terms, but what you have relative to those around you. This often leads to what are called winner-take-all markets. Think about, say, auditions for a huge movie role or a competition for the top academic jobs. A few people get ecstatic, but it can lead to widespread dejection for everyone else. Our social nature means our well-being isn't totally independent. It's tied up with how we perceive the success or even the misery of others.
And I can immediately see how social media throws fuel on that fire. It's basically a highlight reel, isn't it? Everyone's showing their absolute best moments.
Precisely. You nailed it. Everyone posts their best self online, creating this illusion that, oh wow, everyone on Facebook is traveling to amazing places, getting married, getting promotions, and my life just sucks in comparison.
Yeah.
This is a particularly tough problem for young people. There are even movies that capture this teenage angst, like the DUF designated ugly fat friend, which kind of comically shows how social comparison works in cliques, where one person supposedly makes the others look better.
Right, the DUFF.
Yeah.
That's a vivid, if slightly harsh example. So it's not just about what we have, but what we have relative to our peers. Does this extend even to something objective like salary? I mean, surely everyone just wants more money.
You'd think so, logically, but it absolutely extends to salary. Consider that classic experiment. Would you prefer a $600 raise if your colleague gets $800, or a $500 raise if your colleague also gets $500? Now, from a purely rational homo economicus perspective, the $600 raise is better for you, but many people actually choose the second option, the $500 raise, for both. They prefer fairness, or at least avoiding feeling relatively worse off, even if it means less money overall. And this phenomenon even applies to something as personal as sexual frequency.
Seriously. How does that work?
Well, research shows that while your own sexual frequency is positively correlated with happiness, your happiness is negatively correlated with the frequency of those around you. So, for maximal happiness, Dr. Saad jokes, you should marry a spouse with a high libidinal drive, a strong sex drive, and surround themselves with friends who are Catholic priests and nuns.
Okay, that's certainly a memorable takeaway. So our perception of happiness isn't just shaped by others, but also by the quirks of our own memory, which you mentioned can be deceptive.
Yeah, it's a fascinating cognitive bias, really well demonstrated by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman's Peak-N model. Basically, our assessment of past experiences, whether they were good or bad, isn't objective. We tend to judge the whole experience primarily based on its peak, the most intense moment, good or bad, and its end, not the total duration or the average feeling.
Wait, so if I had a week-long vacation that was mostly awful, just dreadful, but the very last day was absolutely fantastic, I might actually remember that as a great trip later on, even though objectively it was mostly bad.
That's precisely it. Kahneman's research shows this quite clearly. Imagine scenario one, 6 pretty miserable days on vacation, but one truly fantastic final day, scenario two. 7 days that were consistently pleasant, maybe a 7 out of 10 the whole time. Objectively, scenario two gives you way more total happiness. But because of that strong positive peak at the end of scenario one, many people would actually remember that trip more favorably. It shows how our brains selectively process and store memories.
Okay, that feels really counterintuitive. Why would our brains work that way? From an evolutionary standpoint, wouldn't it make more sense to remember the overall experience?
Well, if you think about it in terms of survival, it actually starts to make more sense. Kahneman himself explained it like this. Memory wasn't designed to measure ongoing happiness or total suffering. For survival, you really don't need to put a lot of weight on duration. It's how bad they are and whether they end well. Hmm. So our evolutionary past likely prioritize remembering extreme threats or rewards and the final state of an encounter over the cumulative feeling. It might lead to some absurd results in modern life, as Kahneman puts it, but it was probably a very adaptive mechanism back then.
Right, survival first. Okay, so beyond these cognitive biases, you mentioned that a lot of modern unhappiness comes from a deeper issue, this evolutionary mismatch. It's like our ancient hardware trying to run modern software, and it causes glitches.
That's a perfect way to put it. You've captured the essence of the mismatch hypothesis, which is a core idea in evolutionary medicine and psychology. So much of our modern unhappiness stems from these evolutionary adaptations that were super helpful in ancestral environments, but are now, frankly, out of sync or incongruent with our current surroundings. Our bodies and brains evolved over millennia to solve recurring problems in very different settings. When those settings change rapidly, like they have with modern civilization, our evolved traits can suddenly become maladaptive.
Can you give us some concrete examples of this mismatch? How is our ancient wiring tripping us up today?
Sure. Take our food preferences, our gustatory preferences. Our natural liking for high caloric foods, that fatty steak, the rich chocolate mousse, that made perfect sense when calories were scarce and finding the next meal was uncertain for our ancestors. But now, in sedentary societies drowning in readily available calories, this same preference contributes significantly to lifestyle diseases like obesity, diabetes, heart disease. But it's not just physical. Think about social well-being. Why do so many people feel profoundly lonely, even when living in huge cities surrounded by millions?
Yeah, that urban loneliness paradox.
Exactly. It's a direct mismatch from our evolutionary past, living in small, tight-knit bands, maybe up to 150 people, what's often called Dunbar's number. In those groups, deep social bonds were the norm, essential for survival. Modern cities, with their endless sea of strangers, as Dr. Saad puts it, can ironically create this feeling of being surrounded by innumerable people alone together.
And something we often teach kids, stranger danger,
Hmm.
which is important for safety. Could that also inadvertently work against forming connections we might need?
It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? While being cautious of strangers is sometimes absolutely adaptively useful, that maxim can also prevent us from forming the very kinds of meaningful connections that are crucial for our well-being. Aristotle, way back when, highlighted deep friendships as central to a happy life. And modern studies actually show that even brief, positive interactions with strangers on the bus, in a coffee shop, can boost our mood and sense of connection. We can actively try to turn the impersonal nature of big city life into something that feels a bit more like our ancestral village, just by fostering these small connections.
That really speaks to serendipity and just being open to engaging, I suppose. I actually had an experience recently that brought this home for me. I was feeling pretty stressed, rushing around before a trip, and I stopped in my usual cafe.
Yeah.
My favorite table was taken, which initially annoyed me, honestly. But then the new owner came over, a really interesting guy, half Pakistani, half Persian. He offered my son and me a treat, and we just started talking. Even though I had a million things on my mind, I just decided to seize the moment. I learned about his life, his journey, and then completely out of the blue, he mentioned his dad's wife had just bought Dr. Saad's book.
Wow, small world.
Right, it was this lovely, unexpected connection. For me, it became this little parable of how, as Dr. Saad says, openness of one's spirit opens you to countless enriching moments. It just makes life richer, more connected. It really showed how embracing those spontaneous moments can make a difference.
That's a perfect illustration of exactly that, bridging the gap between our evolved need for connection and the realities of modern life. It shows that even when you're stressed or short on time, that openness can transform a mundane situation into something genuinely enriching, fulfilling that social need we all have.
So how do we actively bridge this gap more consistently? How do we build happiness in a world that sometimes feels mismatched with our nature?
It's
I think
okay.
about two areas are absolutely critical: our relationships and our work, those big life decisions.
The pillars of a happy life: decisions and principles.
That's exactly right. Choosing the right life partner and finding the ideal job. These are arguably the two single most important decisions that influence whether you experience immense happiness or, frankly, great misery. We spend the vast majority of our waking hours in these two domains. So if these areas engender joy, as Dr. Saad puts it, we are well on our way to a truly fulfilled life.
Okay, let's tackle the first one. The right life partner. Bertrand Russell famously said, "Caution in love is perhaps the most fatal to true happiness." That's a pretty bold statement, but it definitely speaks to how important this choice is.
It really does.
Yeah.
Warm, intimate relationships are arguably the most important prologue to a good life.
Uh-huh.
You mentioned the Harvard study of adult development earlier. It's been running for decades, now led by Robert Waldinger. They found something truly astonishing. A person's satisfaction in their relationships at age 50 was the single strongest predictor of their physical health at age 80, stronger than cholesterol levels.
Wow. Stronger than cholesterol.
Yeah. And it led to a remarkable 50% increase in survival rates for those with strong relationships. It suggests that strong social bonds offer a massive protective benefit, and none is more crucial than the one with your spouse.
That 50% number is staggering.
Right.
Is that definitely causal, though? Or could there be other factors, confounding variables that explain that correlation? It sounds almost too good to be true.
Yeah, it's a fair question. It's always complex with human behavior. But the strength of the Harvard study is its longitudinal nature following people over decades. This allows for stronger inferences than just a snapshot study. So while we can't say with absolute certainty happy marriage causes longer life, in every single case there are always other factors, the evidence strongly points towards a significant causal link. Happy relationships lead to less chronic stress, healthier behaviors, better emotional support. All things we know improve health. It's a powerful combination. And a key ingredient, according to psychologist John Gottman, who studied marriage for decades, is communication. Open, honest, friendly, respectful communication. He found that spouses who act contemptuous, critical, defensive, or evasive, they're much more likely to divorce, whereas couples who praise and appreciate each other more than they criticize, they tend to have successful, lasting unions. My wife and I, for example, we have this simple rule. We never go to bed angry at each other. It forces communication.
That sounds like a good rule. Now, we often hear about finding the one, right? But Dr. Saad suggests mate choice is more complex than that. He calls it a multi-attribute compensatory choice. What does that actually mean?
It basically means we don't choose a partner based on finding one single perfect trait. Instead, we subconsciously weigh a whole bundle of traits. We compensate for perceived shortcomings in one area if someone scores highly on other desirable attributes. So, for instance, maybe a shorter man attracts a partner considered highly beautiful if he's also very intelligent, charming, and socially dominant. His strengths compensate. Dr. Saad jokingly uses his own marriage as an example, saying he must have scored highly on other things to marry his immeasurably lovely and beautiful wife. In a similar way, I often joke that while my cooking skills are basic and I'm useless at DIY, maybe I compensate by being curious and always ready for a deep conversation. It's about the overall package, the holistic fit, where different strengths balance out.
Chuckles. Okay. Compensatory model. Makes sense. And beyond just chemistry or these different attributes, there's got to be a deeper compatibility needed, right? I remember Dr. Saad telling some stories about matchmakers, and I definitely have a few dating disaster stories of my own that really highlight this point.
Oh, absolutely. This is critical. What truly matters, as matchmakers know and as life teaches us, is that you're not just marrying an individual. You're marrying their values, their beliefs, their mindset, and often their family's influence. Cultural and religious similarity, what researchers call homophily, often matters a great deal for long-term compatibility. Dr. Saad shared a story about a matchmaker setting him up with wealthy Lebanese, Jewish, and Syrian Jewish women. But the matchmaker seemed way more interested in his career stability than anything else. He realized the family values weren't aligned. A family ashamed of a professor wasn't for him. I had a similar experience once, a blind date where the woman's family seemed almost entirely focused on whether I was Christian or Muslim. The idea of being Jewish, let alone agnostic, barely registered. The conversation just devolved into religious tribalism. Needless to say, the date didn't last long.
Wow. Yeah, those experiences really drive home the point that, as Dr. Saad says, love does not conquer all trials and tribulations. If those core values and family dynamics aren't compatible, it's incredibly difficult.
Exactly. If the fundamental values, beliefs, family expectations don't align, the chances of a truly happy, long-lasting union are pretty slim.
So those early signals, those little clues about someone's character, must be really important then, like the T-test or the door test Dr. Saad mentions.
Yes, those early indicators can be incredibly revealing. The door test comes from the movie Arm. A Bronx Tale does the person thoughtfully unlock the car door for their date. It shows consideration. Dr. Saad connects this to his own experience when his future wife brought him hot tea when he had bronchitis, a simple act showing genuine care. These small things can signal fundamental character, and it's also helpful to remember that long-term love isn't static. It typically involves three distinct emotional phases: lust, driven by sex hormones; attraction, fueled by dopamine and norepinephrine; and attachment, mediated by oxytocin and vasopressin. Understanding these natural shifts helps navigate a relationship's evolution from initial spark to deep, enduring companionship.
So love isn't just a feeling, it's also got to be humble, right? It involves admitting mistakes and making amends.
It absolutely has to be. And this touches on an important point about pride. The French language actually distinguishes between two types of pride. There's orgueil, which is that pathological pride, the kind that prevents you from admitting you're wrong or apologizing. It's toxic in relationships. Then there's fierté, which is healthy self-respect. Pathological pride, orgueil, is disastrous. That's why the old saying, never go to bed angry, is so wise. If you're too proud to say sorry, resentment just builds and builds, eroding intimacy. Love requires humility, admitting fault, and offering sincere apologies. Sometimes even what Dr. Saad calls costly signals of apology.
Costly signal. What does that mean exactly? Like a big grand gesture?
Pretty much. It means an apology that demonstrates genuine remorse and commitment, often requiring significant effort or sacrifice to prove its sincerity. There's a 2006 movie, The Last Kiss, that illustrates this perfectly. Zach Braff's character, Michael, cheats on his fiancée. To win her back, he literally plants himself outside her parents' house for days, enduring rain, hunger, everything. His willingness to suffer publicly was this dramatic, costly signal of how much he valued the relationship, and eventually she relented. It shows that the genuine contrition and humility can sometimes mend even deep wounds. Having that great relationship with your spouse, it's definitely one of the two huge secrets to happiness.
Okay, and the second big secret, as you mentioned, is finding purpose and meaning in your professional life. Never continue in a job you don't enjoy. Sounds like great advice, but maybe not always easy to follow in practice.
No, not always easy, but vitally important. A job provides more than just income. It provides purpose, meaning, structure. These are critical for both mental and physical health. Studies actually show that the negative impact of unemployment on well-being is about 5 times greater than the impact of a 1% increase in inflation. That highlights the profound psychological toll it takes, far beyond just the financial strain. And men, in particular, seem disproportionately affected by job-related despair, sadly reflected in higher suicide rates linked to unemployment. It really underscores how crucial professional fulfillment is.
So work isn't just about the paycheck, it's fundamentally about purpose. Does this mean retirement can actually be bad for some people if they lose that sense of meaning?
That's a really interesting point. When you connect it to purpose, mandatory retirement policies, which you still see in some fields like academia, can indeed be detrimental if they suddenly strip someone of their primary source of meaning and engagement. Conversely, delaying retirement or engaging in what's called bridge employment, maybe part-time work after leaving a main career or even significant volunteer work, offers substantial physical and mental health benefits. It can even protect against cognitive decline. Dr. Saad mentions his former supervisor, J. Edward Russo, who stayed incredibly productive into his late 70s. And you see public figures like Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders staying highly engaged well past traditional retirement ages. The key seems to be retaining that sense of purpose and meaning regardless of age.
I can definitely relate to the idea of needing temporal freedom in a job. I mean, I can happily spend 14 hours straight diving deep into research or writing, totally absorbed, but stack up multiple meetings in a day. Suddenly it feels like scheduling asphyxia, as Dr. Saad calls it. That loss of control is just draining.
Your experience perfectly illustrates a key finding. Occupational stress isn't just about the amount of work. It's profoundly linked to autonomy and control. You'll happily work long hours on your book because you control the time and focus. But multiple meetings impose external demands, infringing on that freedom, leading to that feeling of scheduling asphyxia. Research shows this kind of job strain negatively affects health markers, blood pressure, cortisol, inflammation. Another huge factor is perceived justice at work. Do you feel treated fairly? Appreciated? Are your contributions properly valued? Dr. Saad tells this anecdote about a university department chair who essentially told him a Nobel laureate and a recent graduate working as a burger flipper would get the same salary increase based purely on years since their master's degree. That blatant lack of meritocratic justice was a huge red flag for him, a major source of potential unhappiness.
Right, so it's not just what you do, but how and where you do it and whether you feel genuinely valued. What about people who feel they don't have a traditional creative talent to channel into a fulfilling career?
That's a really important question. Not everyone is going to be a filmmaker or a novelist, right? But supporting roles can be incredibly fulfilling too. Think about talent agents or acquisitions editors in publishing. They find immense purpose and meaning in discovering and nurturing others' creativity. The core point is to find some outlet for that existential need for purpose and meaning. Dr. Saad sees his own scientific research as an intellectual playground, full of exciting discoveries and challenges. His advice is crucial. Don't choose a profession just because it's listed as one of the hot job opportunities. Prioritize finding the proper fit between you, your personality, your interest, your values, and your chosen profession. That's the best way to avoid that dreaded midlife existential crisis.
Okay, so whether we're talking about love or work, this foundational principle seems to keep emerging, the wisdom of moderation. Feels like this applies to almost everything in life, doesn't it?
The golden mean and the art of play.
It absolutely does. It's almost universal. All good things take place in moderation. Or that famous Delphic maxim, nothing in excess. Mathematically, this idea is beautifully captured by the inverted U-curve. It shows there is a sweet spot. Too little isn't good, but too much of a good thing can also become detrimental. Aristotle's golden mean described this perfectly thousands of years ago, defining virtue as finding that ideal midpoint for each human trait, avoiding the extremes.
Okay, the inverted U-curve. Let's break that down with some real examples. Where does this pattern show up in our everyday lives?
Oh, its ubiquity is really quite remarkable. It applies across biological, psychological, economic, political domains, pretty much everywhere. Take virtues like Aristotle discussed. Courage, for instance, is the golden mean between cowardice on one end and recklessness on the other. The 7 deadly sins also illustrate extremes to be avoided. Apathy or sloth versus intemperance like greed, lust, gluttony, even something like lust has an optimal point. Empirical studies suggest that for maximal relationship well-being, the optimal sexual frequency is about once a week. It's a curvilinear relationship, not just more is always better. Too little can cause issues, but too much can also lead to problems.
Interesting. So even things we think of as purely positive, like maybe perfectionism, can become problematic if you have too much of it.
Precisely. Perfectionism is a great example. If you have zero perfectionist tendencies, your work might be sloppy, lacking detail. But too much perfectionism, something Dr. Saad admits he struggles with, means you spend ages rechecking things, getting paralyzed instead of moving forward. The sweet spot lies somewhere between apathetic carelessness and that maladaptive, paralyzing perfectionism. It's where high standards drive quality work without causing gridlock. This principle also applies to performance, famously captured by the Yerkes-Dodson law. This law shows that performance peaks at moderate levels of arousal or stress. Too little stress and you're bored, unfocused. Too much stress and you're overwhelmed, anxious, and performance drops off. Dr. Robert Spolsky's work on stress, comparing zebras' acute stress responses to humans' chronic stress, also highlights this optimal stress curve. Dr. Saad even used this to explain things to his young son who was stressed about a quiz. A little stress helps you study, but paralyzing fear is counterproductive.
That's a great practical application. It seems like even the pursuit of happiness itself could fall victim to this inverted U-curve, couldn't it? Can you try too hard to be happy?
Absolutely. And this is a really crucial, perhaps counterintuitive point. Research suggests that even happiness itself should be pursued in moderation. A constant, relentless striving for more happiness can actually lead to detrimental outcomes. Things like excessive risk-taking, maybe being overly gullible, or even greater loneliness as you constantly chase some elusive ideal. It's a paradox. Striving too hard for happiness can, ironically, make you less happy. As Aristotle advised, it's about feeling the right emotions at the right times and on the right occasions. That is the mean course and the best course. The optimal level of happiness, like so many things, seems to follow that inverted U, temperance, and moderation are key.
Okay, so if moderation is the key principle, how do we find that sweet spot while still keeping life engaging, joyful, maybe even exciting? The answer you suggested might be surprisingly simple. Approach life more like a playground.
It's a really profound idea when you dig into it. Humans are, as Dr. Saad puts it, the biggest players of all. Play isn't just for kids, it's the purest expression of our humanity, a fundamental instinct that fuels creativity and brings invigoration to life.
But this isn't about just being silly or frivolous all the time, is it? It sounds like something deeper, more like a philosophy for living.
It's much more than just frivolity. It's described as a way of living life that is rooted in play, even when you're tackling serious challenges or complex problems. Many influential thinkers, Abraham Maslow, Jean Piaget, Carl Jung, even the physicist Richard Feynman, emphasized how vital play is for creativity, development, and problem solving. They argued that almost all real creativity involves a kind of purposeful play, and that we lose something important if we don't retain that childlike creativity as adults. Dr. Saad himself describes his scientific research not as drudgery, but as an intellectual playground, filled with exciting twists, turns, and discoveries.
The movie Big with Tom Hanks always comes to mind for me here, where the kid's mind in an adult body completely shakes up the toy company. That captured that playful spirit so well.
That's a perfect analogy. Tom Hanks's character, Josh, just embodies that youthful exuberance in the often stuffy adult world. He shows how playfulness is refreshingly unique precisely because it is so rare to see in an adult. He totally outshines the serious, stuffy MBA types with his spontaneous, childlike enthusiasm. And play isn't just about fun, it can be an incredibly powerful form of resilience. Think about those heartbreaking images of children finding ways to play amidst the horrors of war zones, like in Lebanon or Syria. Or the movie Life is Beautiful, where the father uses imaginative play to shield his son from the terrifying reality of the Holocaust. Play is even used therapeutically to help people process trauma and rediscover joy.
And laughter, of course. Laughter is such a big part of play, and it has genuine healing powers. I've actually tried to bring more of that into my own work, especially when dealing with some heavy or, frankly, absurd topics online. I even started the satirical video series, Hiding Under the Desk, just to poke fun at certain extreme ideologies. It was my way of finding some levity in things that could otherwise feel pretty grim.
That's a brilliant example. Physician Patch Adams, the movie with Robin Williams famously promoted the real medical benefits of laughter. It increases things like catecholamines and endorphins, improves immune response, lowers blood pressure. Your Hiding Under the Desk series is a perfect illustration of how playfulness doesn't have to diminish the seriousness of a topic. Instead, it offers that much-needed levity, acting as a kind of pressure relief valve from grim realities. There was even a study in Norway that linked a good sense of humor to lower mortality rates. Laughter really might be the best medicine.
Beyond humor, just playing outside seems critical too. Especially now with screens dominating everything, we forget to look up, get out in nature.
You're absolutely right. Our addiction to electronic devices has led to what the author Richard Louv called nature deficit disorder, and it has negative consequences for both kids and adults. The biologist E.O. Wilson had this concept of biophilia, our innate, evolved need to connect with nature, with living things. And the benefits of doing so are really well documented. Faster recovery in hospitals, reduced stress in office environments, overall improvements in mental and physical health. Dr. Saad mentions doing walk and talk sessions with a colleague, combining that intellectual play with the restorative power of being outdoors. It's simple but powerful.
And what about intellectual play? Things like puzzles, games, escape rooms. I know my own daughter's fifth-grade science project turned into a kind of fun intellectual playground for our whole family. We were testing how different food colorings affected how people perceive the taste of drinks.
That's a perfect example. Intellectual play puzzles, games, treasure hunts, science projects engages our imagination, curiosity, creativity. It mirrors many elements of serious scientific discovery, actually. And it's not just for adults or academics. Dr. Saad tells the amazing story of Emily Rosa. At age 9, for her fourth-grade science fair project, she designed and conducted an experiment that debunked the practice of therapeutic touch. Her paper was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association.
Wow, at 9 years old.
Yep. It just illustrates how science can be this democratic, playful pursuit driven by curiosity, even though academia often has those intense publish or perish pressures. It shows that curiosity can spark incredible things at any age.
That's fantastic. Does this idea of playfulness extend into our romantic relationships too?
Oh, definitely. Research on assortative mating basically suggests that humorous, fun-loving, playful people tend to be attracted to partners with similar mindsets. Shared humor is a strong correlate of marital satisfaction. Dr. Saad mentions sharing witty banter with his wife on social media and how their family engages in creative activities together, like photography contests or rapid-fire poetry, just to keep those playful bonds strong. It fosters a positive family environment. He even shares this wild story from his teens involving some work for Israeli security, a real-life James Bond kind of experience. Despite how serious it was, he remembers it vividly as an amazing example of life as a playground, showing how that mindset can reframe even intense situations.
So after exploring all these facets of play, what's one of Dr. Saad's most direct, tangible recommendations for bringing more play into our daily lives?
His parting advice in this section is wonderfully simple, maybe deceptively so. Get a dog. Dogs just epitomize playfulness, and they offer so many benefits. Companionship, protection, they encourage exercise, reduce stress, boost oxytocin levels, even help facilitate social interactions with other people. He literally says, forget about Prozac, get a dog, and immerse yourself in play. It's a powerful reminder that life is precious and fleeting, and embracing a playful mindset can help us honor that, while also giving us a crucial pressure relief valve from life's inevitable stresses.
Get a dog. I like it. Okay, so we have moderation and play as key guides, but life inevitably throws challenges and setbacks our way. How do we navigate those? It sounds like persistence and maybe even embracing failure has a crucial role in building lasting happiness.
Conquering obstacles and eradicating regret.
Yes, and this leads to another really powerful concept Dr. Saad discusses: anti-fragility. The idea famously captured in the Nietzsche quote, "That which doesn't kill you makes you stronger." It's more than just a cliche. Experiencing adversity and overcoming it can genuinely make us more determined, fostering grit, resilience, this quality becoming stronger through challenges, not just surviving them. This mindset is the direct opposite of what he calls victimology, which he sees as shackling individuals, sometimes even entire groups, to a sense of perpetual victimhood. This, he argues, hinders progress and ultimately happiness. Good therapists, for instance, focus on helping people overcome trauma and empower themselves, not encouraging them to wallow in it indefinitely.
And Dr. Saad himself has certainly faced significant adversity. You mentioned his parents being kidnapped during the Lebanese Civil War, government attempts to seize his book royalties. He seems to really embody this anti-fragility he talks about.
He absolutely does. He describes these events as things that could easily have led him to wallow in victimology, as he puts it. But instead, he consciously chose to use them as fuel, driving his determination to succeed. His own resilience serves as a powerful example of choosing to overcome rather than letting hardship define you, turning adversity into a catalyst for growth.
So rejection isn't just something to be endured, it can actually be a stepping stone. I think you mentioned this applies particularly, maybe controversially, to men in courtship.
Well, Dr. Saad points out the evolutionary reality that men, historically and statistically, face astoundingly high rejection rates when pursuing mates. This, he argues, has likely made persistence a sexually selected trait in males. Now, it's very clear this is not an excuse or invitation for harassment, but it highlights an evolutionary dynamic where men often had to demonstrate qualities like perseverance to win a mate. But this principle of persistence through rejection applies much more broadly, of course. Think about famous successes. J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter was rejected by 12 publishers. The Chicken Soup for the Soul series, rejected 144 times.
144 times. That's incredible persistence.
Isn't it? The Beatles were rejected multiple times. Steven Spielberg got rejected from film school 3 times. These are huge cultural touchstones that almost didn't happen because of initial rejections. It just hammers home how vital it is to push through that no.
It really does. And it connects directly to Angela Lee Duckworth's research on grit, that idea of stick-to-itiveness. I know Dr. Saad also shares some pretty intense personal examples of grit, particularly around weight loss and running marathons.
Yes, his personal stories really illustrate this. He talks about the extraordinary discipline, persistence, and grit required for a significant weight loss journey, sticking to a strict calorie count, walking 15,000, 20,000 steps daily, day after day. He also describes running marathons and hitting the wall, usually around the 18 or 20-mile mark, where every fiber of your body is telling you to stop the pain. Pushing through that requires sheer mind over body, activating that deep well of grit and perseverance. He even mentions regretting never attempting an Ironman triathlon, framing it as a reminder that it's never too late to challenge yourself. Even in the supposedly cerebral world of academia, rejection is constant. Grant applications, submissions to top journals, the rejection rates are incredibly high. Dr. Saad even had to counsel a graduate student suffering from fear of epistemological rejection, the fear that their cherished hypothesis might be proven wrong by the data. His advice was blunt. We must throw the proverbial dice. You have to risk failure to achieve anything. Stanford's D School, their design school, actively encourages a fail-faster mindset, teaching students to get comfortable with uncertainty and learn how to turn failures into valuable learning opportunities.
That's such a powerful mindset shift, viewing failure not as an endpoint, but as data, as fuel. And he also shared a really sweet story about his daughter, who apparently has a natural talent for cultivating his persistence.
It's a wonderful anecdote, really showing how encouragement from others can bolster our own grit. His daughter, apparently with unwavering determination, kept pushing him relentlessly to contact Russell Tompkins Jr., the lead singer of the legendary soul group The Stylistics, to invite him on his show. Despite Dr. Saad's initial hesitations and probably some failed attempts, her constant hounding, her persistence eventually paid off. It led to a cherished personal connection and a memorable evening together. It just highlights how persistence, whether it's your own or someone else encouraging you, can open doors to incredibly meaningful experiences.
That's lovely. And he also talks about how seemingly harsh, rigorous training, like the Ivy League butt kicking he got during his PhD exams at Cornell, was actually designed intentionally to build that resilience, that anti-fragility.
That's exactly right. He describes how professors would intentionally grill students, asking really tough, sometimes even indignantly phrased questions. It felt frazzled at the time, he says, but he later realized the goal wasn't just academic assessment, it was to make a man out of you, to prepare students for the inevitable challenges and criticisms they'd face in their careers. He even had the experience of having to rewrite a dissertation summary multiple times because the supervisor kept saying it put him to sleep. Grueling, yes, but formative. He also shares this very poignant, symbolic story about losing his wedding ring, one engraved with his wife's unique fingerprint in a fast-moving river. He dove repeatedly, desperately searching, and miraculously spotted a shiny light and recovered it. Years later, it fell off again, indoors this time, and only a faint ping sound allowed him to find it. These experiences became powerful metaphors for him about persistence, the preciousness of love, and focusing on the truly important things in life.
Wow. Those stories really resonate. So persistence helps us achieve goals and overcome setbacks. But what about the baggage of the past, those choices we made, or maybe the choices we didn't make? Regret can be such a heavy burden.
You're absolutely right. Regret can fundamentally eat away at our sense of inner peace, as Dr. Saad puts it. It actively prevents us from reaching that state the ancient Greeks called ataraxia, that deep, calm, unshakable tranquility of mind. And it's not just psychological. Neuroscience actually shows that regret has negative physiological consequences, can increase cortisol, worsen physical symptoms, and is linked to increased depression risk, especially in older age if it's not managed. While some regret can be functional learning from mistakes, a lot of the regret we carry is unnecessary and actively harmful to our well-being.
So what kind of regrets tend to plague us the most? Is it the things we did that we wish we hadn't, or the things we didn't do? I feel like I probably suffer from both.
Well, research by Dr. Tom Gilovich at Cornell found something quite interesting. In the long term, regret is predominantly about inactions. It's the things we didn't do that tend to haunt us more over the years. As the old saying goes, fools live to regret their words, wise men to regret their silence. It's the unspoken feelings, the untaken journeys, the unpursued passions. I regret that I never went to art school. Those tend to linger longer and cause more enduring pain than regrets about actions taken, which we often rationalize or learn from more easily. He notes that even the Anglican morning prayer captures this duality, confessing, "We have left undone those things which we ought to have done, and we have done those things which we ought not to have done." We regret both, but inactions often sting more over time.
That's fascinating. And Dr. Saad also brings up a potentially controversial point here, connecting regret to certain modern ideologies. He discusses how, in his view, militant feminism's encouragement of meaningless one-night stands might have pushed against evolutionary realities and led to significant unhappiness and sexual regret for many women. That's quite a statement.
It is, and it's important to frame it as his argument presented in the book. Dr. Saad argues that some feminist ideology, by encouraging women towards sexual promiscuity as a form of equality with men, ignored fundamental evolutionary differences in mating strategies and costs. He posits that women, due to higher biological investment in reproduction, tend to regret sexual actions, casual encounters, more than inactions, which is generally the opposite pattern seen in men. He points to longitudinal data suggesting women's subjective well-being in the U.S. actually declined over a 35-year period, both in absolute terms and relative to men, during a time of increasing sexual liberation. His conclusion, based on this interpretation, is that unencumbered sex is rarely a path to deep happiness for women. Rather, it is committed relationships like marriage built on trust and investment that correlate positively with female happiness. He argues that ignoring these evolved differences is detrimental.
Okay, so that's his specific argument, connecting evolutionary psychology, regret patterns, and social trends. It definitely highlights potential mismatches. And speaking of regrets, Bronnie Ware's work on the regrets of the dying feels incredibly relevant here. It's like a roadmap of what to avoid.
Absolutely. Ware worked as a palliative nurse, and she documented the most common regrets she heard from people at the very end of their lives. It's incredibly illuminating and maybe a bit sobering. The top 5 were: 1. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. That's huge. 2. I wish I hadn't worked so hard, missing out on life, on family. 3. I wish I had had the courage to express my feelings, holding back emotions. 4. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends, letting important connections fade. 5. And finally, I wish I had let myself be happier.
That last one, I wish I had let myself be happier. It really brings it back to personal agency, doesn't it? Like happiness was a choice they didn't make.
Exactly. It powerfully emphasizes personal control, echoing Epictetus again. Cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. So much of happiness is within our sphere of influence if we only give ourselves permission. Ware's findings urge us to address these potential regrets now while we still have time.
So living authentically seems like a key defense against accumulating these kinds of regrets. Being true to yourself, living in alignment with your inner values.
Precisely. Being genuine, achieving that congruency between your internal feelings and your outward actions and words, minimizes the potential for future regret. And research shows it correlates strongly with psychological health and even professional success. Dr. Saad contrasts what he perceives as the inauthenticity of some political figures, like Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris, who he feels project an aura of falsity, with someone like Donald Trump. He argues that Trump's perceived "I don't give a FK" attitude, regardless of its content, registers as authentic to his supporters. Dr. Saad shares his own experience facing religious hiring tests, where he absolutely refused to modulate any part of my personal identity, boldly declaring himself an atheist evolutionist Lebanese Jew. He said he'd rather go back to the socialist frozen tundra known as Quebec than compromise his core self for a job. That existential authenticity, he believes, is crucial for achieving ataraxia.
Standing your ground on who you are. And crucially, the message seems to be, it's almost never too late to chase those dreams or make those changes that might otherwise become regrets.
Absolutely. The stories he shares are incredibly inspiring on this front. Dr. Dagobert Bro earned his PhD in history at age 91. Manfred Steiner got his PhD in physics at 89 after retiring from a successful career as a medical professor. These individuals pursued long-held dreams purely for the intrinsic value, proving it's seldom truly too late, especially for education-related regrets, which surveys show are the most common type of life regret. He also mentions Amy Wax, who made a significant career switch from being a neurologist to becoming a law professor later in her career, despite the extraordinary sunk costs of her medical training, because she prioritized occupational happiness. Now, of course, this needs to be grounded in reality. He references a funny Three's Company episode where Jana has to face the fact that she's just too old and, frankly, not talented enough to become a professional dancer. The "you can be anything you want to be" mantra can sometimes be illusory if it completely ignores reality.
Right. Balancing dreams with reality. But still, avoiding that future rocking chair test where you look back and regret the things you were too afraid to try.
Exactly. Tony Robbins' rocking chair test is a great mental model. Imagine yourself at 85. Will you regret not having tried something out of fear? A good life, Dr. Saad suggests, might be measured by how peacefully you can sit in that rocking chair, maybe reading good books, rather than being consumed by what-ifs. But it's also important to identify what he calls poorly calibrated regret. His own father, for example, deeply regretted not sending him to a Jewish day school. But Dr. Saad himself saw his secular schooling as a benefit, allowing him to interact with a wider range of people. Some regrets are based on others' expectations or misplaced priorities, and those we should probably learn to let go of.
That makes sense. Letting go of misplaced guilt. What about aging? That seems like a huge source of potential regret or bitterness in our culture, especially around appearance or lost youth.
Indeed. Our culture is very youth-obsessed. He discusses Polina Poroskova, the former supermodel, who expressed considerable bitterness about feeling invisible as she aged, lamenting that men prefer younger women, and even stating evolution is sexist. Dr. Saad contrasts this with an attitude of accepting reality, acknowledging that nature always wins. He critiques what he sees as strands of militant feminism that foster this kind of age-related bitterness, arguing it prevents achieving ataraxia. Just as a male soccer player inevitably loses his peak physical abilities with age, or a man's sexual vigor changes over time, accepting the natural processes of aging allows for more grace and contentment than fighting an unwinnable battle against time and biology. Living in reality, not bitter self-deception, is key.
Acceptance over bitterness. And finally, a really common regret seems to be about prioritizing material possessions over experiences. I know I feel a pang thinking about all the wonderful old bookstores I used to browse that are gone now. I regret not spending more time, more money in them.
That's a very relatable regret, and the research strongly backs it up. Studies consistently show that spending money on life experiences, travel, concerts, learning new skills, even just meals out with friends, brings greater and more lasting happiness, and significantly less regret than buying material goods. That Expedia commercial from the Super Bowl a few years back captured it perfectly, with Ewan McGregor narrating something like, "I doubt any of us will look back and think, I wish I had bought an even thinner TV. Do you think any of us will regret the things we didn't do?" Few people lie on their deathbed regretting not buying a fancier watch. Countless people regret not taking that trip to Paris, or not going on that safari, or not learning to play the guitar. Interestingly, while younger people tend to prioritize extraordinary experiences, as we age, research suggests we come to value both ordinary and extraordinary positive experiences more equally. Ultimately, this whole deep dive really reinforces that happiness isn't something you pursue directly, like chasing a butterfly. It's more like a destination one reaches by making optimal decisions along the way. It's about cultivating those winning mindsets and embracing old-fashioned virtues like temperance, gratitude, persistence, and hope.
That's a really beautiful summary. And to close out this section on overcoming obstacles and regret, Dr. Saad shares two incredibly powerful stories of individuals who found contentment despite facing immense hardship. They truly lived those winning mindsets.
Yes, they're incredibly moving. First, the story of David McCallum, who was wrongly imprisoned for nearly 29 years, yet he emerged with astonishing grace and a lack of bitterness. When asked how he managed, he credited his mother's unwavering belief in his innocence and the constant inspiration of his sister, who had cerebral palsy and faced immense challenges with perseverance her entire life. He actively chose forgiveness and wisdom over victimhood. Then there's the story of John Jelani, a man who went from being wealthy to homeless on the streets, yet Dr. Saad observed in him an admirable lack of self-pity. Jelani said he only truly valued a healthy body and an inquisitive mind, demonstrating that inner contentment could be found even amidst the most tragic external circumstances. These men found profound peace, not by chasing happiness, but by cultivating incredible inner strength and perspective.
Wow. Okay, what a journey we've been on today. We've really peeled back the layers of happiness, haven't we? From understanding our evolutionary wiring and the unique traps of modern life, right through to the profound importance of our daily choices and big life decisions. We've seen how crucial it is to embrace moderation, that golden meme, to infuse our lives with genuine playfulness, to cultivate persistence, especially when facing failure and rejection, and to actively work on eradicating unnecessary regret.
Absolutely. I think ultimately, this deep dive into Dr. Saad's work shows us really clearly that you are truly the architect and the orchestrator of your own happiness. It's not really about being born with a sunny disposition, though that helps. It's fundamentally about the conscious choices you make, the winning mindsets you cultivate, and perhaps those simple old-fashioned virtues, temperance, gratitude, hope, persistence that you choose to adopt and practice. That reaffirmation of agency, I think, is incredibly powerful.
It really is. So, as you, our listener, reflect on everything we've explored today, maybe consider this final thought. Inspired by people like Victor Davis Hanson, who apparently ends his calls with simple words of connection, or those individuals like David McCallum and Bijan Jelani who found peace against all odds, what's one proactive step you could take today, right now, to be your own architect of happiness? Will it be reaching out to connect with someone, maybe even a stranger? Reevaluating a goal you've been putting off, maybe forgiving an old slight, letting go of a regret, or perhaps simply giving yourself permission, as Bronnieware's patients wish they had, to let yourself be happier. The choice, as Dr. Saad emphasizes throughout his work and as always, is yours.